Hey there, welcome to School of Emo, the podcast where we dive into the world of emo, pop punk, and everything in between. If you've ever found yourself in your car screaming the lyrics to Taking Back Sunday, wearing way too much eyeliner in the early 2000s, adding a buckle or a chain to every outfit you've put on, you are in the right place. I'm Erin Judge, and each week I will be your fellow student, guiding you through the music, the culture, and the history that shaped an entire generation of angsty teens. I am not the teacher of this school. I am a fellow student, here to learn alongside you and from you. Together, we will cover a lot of information that doesn't really matter, but will remind us of the days of stalking Myspace channels and getting lost in chat rooms. So connect your dial-up, turn on your webcam, and let's go to School of Emo. Welcome back. Today we are going to talk about what some would consider to be one of the big heads, one of the founders, leaders, one of the biggest names in emo. I don't necessarily agree, but I do love the history. I love their evolution, and I love their fandom, and that is Fall Out Boy. Fall Out Boy. So whether you like them for their clever lyrics, their theatrical flair, their pop punk to pop evolution, or if you just rolled their eyes whenever they became more radio staples and you haven't necessarily loved them since, I hope that you enjoy today's episode because we are going to talk about why they are considered to be kind of one of the trifecta bands of emo, why people are so passionate about that and debate which album is the most emo centric or not, and their role in emo culture, especially in that third wave of emo. So we're going to go all the way back to the early 2000s, where Fall Out Boy was formed out of the Chicago hardcore scene. So we've talked a lot about East Coast, West Coast, kind of Midwest. We haven't necessarily hit on Chicago as much yet. So going to Chicago, and there was a hardcore scene, and guitarist Joe Troman, as well as bassist, the iconic Pete Wentz, were the first to connect from their place in that scene. And then they recruited Patrick Stump, who was originally just auditioning to be a drummer, but then showed that he had the voice and the talent to be a frontman, and he had the songwriting skills to add even more value to the band. So then became their frontman. And then they rounded it out with drummer Andy Hurley, but he actually officially joined the band later. So the official members at the start were Joe, Pete, and then Patrick, and then Andy after a while became kind of a staple within the band. Pete was one of the biggest founders of the band. He was part of the Chicago hardcore and metalcore music scene. He was the lead singer and songwriter for the band Arma Angelus from 1998 to 2002. He was also in several other bands in the late 1990s, including Firstborn, Birthright, Extinction, and Race Trader. So he was not new to music, but decided to start a new band, like most do, right, in that space. And with his connection to Joe, then began what we now know of as Fall Out Boy. Pete's was joking about the addition of Patrick in kind of these early days in an interview and said, I remember Patrick walking in with these glasses and sideburns, and I was like, this kid looks like a footnote in a rock history book. And then he opened his mouth to sing, and I thought, okay, we might have something here. Kind of knowing what they had, what made them unique, and what made them special. So while it started out as a side project for hardcore kids who wanted to make something a bit more catchier, something with a little bit more melody, still carrying the energy of the Chicago scene, it very quickly took off to become probably more than they could have ever imagined. And that takes us to the grave. Take this to your grave in 2003, which was their debut full-length album. This was released by Fueled by Ramen in 2003, and the Fueled by Ramen actually was founded. We've talked about them before when we were talking about like Jimmy Eat World, but they began in 1996 as a college project by John Janik and Vinny Fiorello, who could only afford ramen noodles due to their investment in the fledgling label, which gave them the name. The label rose to prominence by signing and promoting alternative and pop punk acts like the Hippos, Panic at the Disco, Paramore, and of course, Fall Out Boy. So this was early on in their kind of height of fame as well. This was a great band for them to have on their roster early on. They ended up partnering with Warner Music Group, which launched them into wider success with the help of their distribution arm and resources, enabling them to expand their marketing and continue signing more influential artists. So Fueled by Ramen kind of linked up to Warner. But going back to Take This to Your Grave, this album was considered one of the defining blueprints of the mid 2000s emo pop, which is really what we could consider a big piece and subset of that third wave of emo. We had the theatrics with Panic at the Disco and even My Chemical Romance. We had some people that kind of blinked over into more of that kind of hardcore emo core space, like probably The Used, My Chemical Romance. We had more of the singer-songwriter vulnerable side, like Dashboard Confessional, Jimmy Eat World. And so this was kind of another subset of this emo pop, sort of theatrical, leaning a little bit into that with a little less heaviness tied to it. So on this first album, we got songs like Saturday, Grand Theft Autumn, Where Is Your Boy, and Dead on Arrival, which quickly became staples in the Warped Tour era, right at the perfect time in these kind of mid to or early to mid 2000s. The record had raw energy, Patrick's soaring vocals, Pete's dramatic lyrics, those punchy pop punk riffs that we all love. It was underground enough for the scene kids, but catchy enough to hint at something bigger and be accepted on a wider stage. So some fans at that time called it the emo kids Bible, which I think a lot of people would probably fight over because even second wave to third wave, right? This is the biggest debate in the emo space. And they definitely pushed those boundaries, those limits, what you might judge or think of all of this as. But Pete once said, looking back at that record, we wrote Take This to Your Grave like it was the last album we were ever going to make. That's why it sounds like every song could be a single. It was our one shot. And while the album really didn't chart that high at first, it spread through word of mouth, online forums, and burned CDs. And very quickly within the space, Fall Out Boy became on every emo kid's radar and became this known staple within the scene. So, of course, digging into some of the lyrics, we're going into Grand Theft Autumn, Where Is Your Boy? Where is your boy tonight? I hope he is a gentleman. And maybe he won't find out what I know. You are the last good thing about this part of town. When I wake up, I'm willing to take my chances on the hope I forget that you hate him more than you notice. I wrote this for you, so you need him. I could be him. I could be an accident, but I'm still trying. And that's more than I can say for him. Where's your boy tonight? I hope he is a gentleman. And maybe he won't find out what I know. You are the last good thing about this part of town. Someday I'll appreciate and value, get off my ass and call you. The meantime, I'll sport my brand new fashion of waking up with pants on at 4 in the afternoon. You need him. I could be him. I could be an accident, but I'm still trying. And that's more than I can say for him. After that, a couple of years later, 2005, we got From Under the Cork Tree, which was the breakthrough, the big one that cemented Fall Out Boy as emo icons and staples. This album was the one that gave us Sugar We're Going Down, Dance Dance. It went double platinum, sold millions of copies, and cemented Fall Out Boy as the face of emo in the mainstream. It was very catchy. It was very radio friendly. It was on MTV, TRL, on the radio. It was everywhere because it wasn't quite as hard, right? They leaned into theatrics. It wasn't too theatrical either. It was something that was palatable, but also highly entertaining and kind of addicting in the way that it was created because it had a little bit of everything. It had the long song titles that made you curious, the quotable lyrics that we couldn't get enough of. There were AIM statuses. We had a sense of melodrama that was both self-aware and sincere. So that connection to emo and vulnerability without being too much in that space. It wasn't really dark. It also was a bit more polished and pop oriented, which again allowed it to be catchy. It like snuck into your brain and kind of stuck with you when you listen to it. So one of the most iconic songs that remains as one of their top songs and will be forever is Sugar We're Going Down. Am I more than you bargained for yet? I've been dying to tell you anything you want to hear because that's just who I am this week. Lie in the grass next to the mausoleum. I'm just a notch in your bedpost, but you're just a line in a song. Drop a heart and break a name. We're always sleeping in and sleeping for the wrong team. We're going down, down in an earlier round. And sugar, we're going down swinging. I'll be your number one with a bullet, a loaded God complex, cock it and pull it. We're going down, down in an earlier round. And sugar, we're going down swinging. I'll be your number one with a bullet, a loaded God complex, cock it and pull it. Is this more than you bargained for yet? Oh, don't mind me. I'm watching you two from the closet, wishing to be the friction in your jeans. Isn't it messed up how I'm just dying to be him? I'm just a notch in your bedpost, but you're just a line in a song. Drop a heart and break a name. We're always sleeping in and sleeping for the wrong team. We're going down, down in an earlier round. And sugar, we're going down swinging. I'll be your number one with a bullet, a loaded God complex, cock it and pull it. Like many bands of this time, especially in this Warped Tour space, popularity and fame was joined by chaos, especially for Pete Wentz. He quickly became a tabloid fixture. His heavy eyeliner look made him the poster boy of the emo aesthetic, which was not necessarily popular and liked, right? There was a lot of criticism of this space and especially the way that scene kids presented themselves, and especially men and boys. So it led to a lot of rumors about him, particularly about him and My Chemical Romance's Mikey Way, centering around their rumored relationship during the 2005 Vans Warped Tour, which many fans referred to as the Summer of Like. While it was never officially confirmed, this fan driven lore was supported by their close friendship during the tour and interpretations of certain song lyrics. So, Fall Out Boy's Bang the Doldrums, which some fans believe was inspired by their alleged brief relationship, and something that people still continue to think about today. In 2005, LiveJournal was a big thing, and Pete was really heavily involved and active in that space. And he posted, amazing New Mexico sunset. I'm hanging on a bridge with my friend Mikey Way from My Chem. It's all orange and pink above us. We went to another water park again. I love high fives again. Totally back in love. Saw the most amazing movie. I think it's called Spirited Away. Watch it. So maybe there were things going on. Maybe it was just for publicity and they were friends. We don't know. But that became a big rumor and a talk in the tabloids. Pete Wentz was also on One Tree Hill, one of my favorite shows, in season 3, which was between 2005 and 2006, making cameo appearances in episodes, with his significant role being in the episode When It Isn't Like It Should Be, which aired April 5th, 2006. He did play himself, and he had this brief storyline where he dated Peyton Sawyer. So she had this role of putting together these different musical artists, leaned a lot into this kind of alternative pop punk emo space, which was incredible, especially for that time and within pop culture as a whole. But he was there as Fall Out Boy, and then they had a relationship, which weird because he was older and she was supposed to be a teenager, so a little awkward. But it was kind of interesting, especially if you were a Fall Out Boy fan. You would have enjoyed seeing him there. Not the best actor, but he was playing himself, so that didn't really matter, but it wasn't himself. And then in 2006, around all this time as well, nude photos of Pete leaked online, which turned him into one of the first big celebrity internet scandals of the MySpace era. This is new to internet, right? And so this is kind of early on when this would have even been a possibility. And with MySpace, especially in the connection to bands, he was one of the first kind of in that space. And he later reflected on that time in an interview and said, I became the villain and the heartthrob at the same time. It was like you couldn't separate Fall Out Boy from this larger than life character that the media made me out to be. The band, outside of Pete, also had their share of tensions. Fame wasn't easy, and Patrick, who was shy and reserved, often clashed with Pete's extroverted personality. But together they created lightning in a bottle, and they stuck it out as long as possible, within a couple of years after all of this, giving us Infinity on High, their next studio album. So because of the success that they had seen from under the cork tree, they wanted to make sure that they weren't going to become a one album wonder. They wanted to do something great, which is where they like put their energy with Infinity on High. And it worked out because this debuted at #1 on Billboard 200, fueled by the hit single, This Ain't a Scene, It's an Arms Race. It also brought us Thanks for the Memories, which is, again, an emo staple. Going into the lyrics, I'm going to make it bend and break. Say a prayer, but let the good times roll in case God doesn't show. And I want these words to make things right, but it's the wrongs that make the words come to life. Who does he think he is? If that's the worst you've got, better put your finger back to the keys. One night and one more time. Thanks for the memories, even though they weren't so great. He tastes like you, only sweeter. One night, yeah, and one more time. Thanks for the memories. Thanks for the memories. See, he tastes like you, only sweeter. Been looking forward to the future, but my eyesight is going bad. In this crystal ball, it's always cloudy except for when you look into the past, one night stand off. One night and one more time. Thanks for the memories, even though they weren't so great. He tastes like you, only sweeter. One night, yeah, and one more time. Thanks for the memories. Thanks for the memories. See, he tastes like you, only sweeter. They say I only think in the form of crunching numbers, in hotel rooms collecting page six lovers. Get me out of my mind and get you out of those clothes. I'm a liner away from getting you into the mood. Whoa. Jay-Z actually introduced this album, which was a huge cultural statement at the time, showing that emo, mainstream emo, was no longer a niche scene and gave us Fall Out Boy now rubbing shoulders with hip hop moguls and many pop stars. They really catapulted themselves and set themselves apart. And this is where, even in that third wave, a lot of bands are kind of taking different paths. And I think we saw Warped Tour even shifting and changing around this time. And you saw the bands that would go on to be more mainstream pop kind of transition into a different space versus those who might have stuck a little bit more close to the scene, like My Chemical Romance or some of those bands, or even some of the kind of more underground-esque bands that we still have today that tended to kind of move more towards like the rock and more of the hardcore space. So musically, Infinity on High did start to branch out for them. It had R&B influences, they had horn sections, which was different, more experimentation, and Patrick described it as us trying to see how far we could stretch without losing ourselves. But some critics began to already accuse them of selling out. And even though that might have been a little true and it did start to kind of look a little different than it started, fans were still embracing them. And songs like Thanks for the Memories became anthems that we still know of today. So that experimentation led us a year later, 2008, for Folie à Deux, which is where there became more backlash and more burnout for the band. So Folie à Deux went all in. It pushed beyond the boundaries that Infinity on High created. It was their most experimental and polarizing album to date. The record leaned into glam rock, pop, and theatrical arrangements. It featured guest appearances from Lil Wayne, Elvis Costello, and Debbie Harry. But at the same time, the emo scene was not ready for it. And this was around the time that the emo scene was starting to kind of phase out a little bit, maybe moving to a fourth wave, but it was changing. So sales lagged compared to their previous records, and critics didn't know what to do with it. Pete later admitted in an interview, we made a record we believed in, but the timing was bad. The culture wasn't there yet. And it was true. Fans were divided. The band was exhausted. And by 2009, Fall Out Boy announced a hiatus. This was rough. Pete dealt with depression and personal struggles. Patrick launched a solo career that was met with mixed reviews. Andy and Joe also worked on other projects, including a heavy metal band, The Damned Things. And Patrick later revealed, I felt like I had let everyone down. I thought Fall Out Boy was done forever, which bands also believed. But like most bands, by 2013, they shocked fans with a return and gave us the album, the comeback album, Save Rock and Roll, which was a hard pivot from what they had created before. It was glossy, pop driven, full of arena ready hooks. They figured out who they wanted to be, what their evolution looked like, and where they were going to fit into the space, the music scene as a whole, moving forward. This is where we got the lead single, My Songs Know What You Did in the Dark, Light 'em Up, which announced loudly that Fall Out Boy was back. They were different, but they were still going to lean into the catchy, get under your skin kind of lyrics you can both dance to and feel deep into your body. The album featured Elton John on the title track, which was a symbolic passing of the torch from one flamboyant rock act to another. And then some of the long-term emo fans did feel betrayed. This was not an emo basement era Fall Out Boy album, but the record worked. They found a new group of people, they found a new space, a new niche for themselves, and they were back on the charts. And then they became a staple in pop culture once again, not in emo, but in pop culture as a whole. In 2015, we got American Beauty, American Psycho. And then in 2018, we got Mania, which leaned more into the pop, EDM, and arena rock space. We got songs like Centuries and Uma Thurman, which became sports anthems and TV soundtrack staples. Mania was especially polarizing. Critics were mixed, fans were divided. And Pete said, "We've never been afraid of people hating us. If people aren't mad, we're probably doing something wrong." So they knew what they were doing and they were sticking to what they felt was right, knowing that some people would love it and some people would also hate it. But at this point, Fall Out Boy was no longer emo. They were more about pop rock arena level stardom. So while they aren't considered emo really today, and that's not where they ended, they still had such a strong, undeniable impact on emo culture as we know it today. They were one of the biggest bands bringing emo into the mainstream, especially in that third wave. You may say for better or for worse. If you're a really tried and true first and second wave emo fan, you may not love it. But the truth is, we wouldn't have the music still going on today. We wouldn't have tours going on today if it wasn't for the bands that made it more mainstream and let money kind of follow that space. Their lyrics became away messages on AIM. Their hairstyles became the blueprint for the emo look. Their success opened doors for bands like Panic at the Disco, Paramore, My Chemical Romance to reach wider audiences. They were also polarizing, where some purists might have accused them of watering down emo for the masses, but truly without Fall Out Boy, like there would be no emo within pop culture. And a lot of us wouldn't have found it or have been around for it the way that it grew. And I think scene culture probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Fall Out Boy and some of the other bands around this time that really leaned into that space. And while you may not think scene culture is especially tied to emo at its core, there is a way that has created community and brought like the emo community as a whole together. Members of Fall Out Boy have not generally considered themselves emo, so they don't necessarily say that they are an emo band or that they ever were. Although their early music was often labeled as emo pop or pop punk, they do acknowledge the emo pinup boys label and have fandom that includes many emo fans. The band themselves see their sound as pop punk or pop rock, with Pete Wentz noting the band's fondness for the Get Up Kids as an influence. So being influenced by emo bands. And he summed it up in an interview saying, "We weren't trying to be the voice of a generation. We were just some kids making noise in Chicago, but somehow it ended up being bigger than us." And that hasn't stopped with their own music. The band is still also involved in pushing the music industry forward as a whole, and especially within this space of emo pop punk kind of alternative sound. Outside of the Fall Out Boy work, Pete Wentz is involved in the music industry as a record label owner, songwriter, and musician for other bands. Patrick and Pete founded their own record label, DCD2 Records, which was originally Decay Dance Records, which is an imprint of Fueled by Ramen, which they launched in 2005. This has been instrumental in launching some of the biggest careers in alternative and pop punk, including Panic at the Disco, which is where they released the multi-platinum debut album, A Fever You Can't Sweat Out, Gym Class Heroes. They launched their career. The Academy is that pop punk band that was signed and toured with Fall Out Boy. And even today, they continue to sign new acts, regularly promoting them by taking them on tour with Fall Out Boy. So using their own fame, their own success to push others forward, which is so important. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I think Fall Out Boy in the emo space can be highly polarizing for good reason. I don't consider them to be like a top emo band myself, but I understand where some people would. I remember getting From Under the Cork Tree as a CD for Christmas and being obsessed and not being able to put it down. So I completely understand that love and desire. I kind of let them go as they changed course, which I'm sure many of you did. Maybe you didn't and you followed along, and maybe you're more obsessed with them now than you ever were. So, whatever you think, whatever your experience has been, please share. If you're on YouTube, share in the comments, talk with each other about it. That's what this whole podcast is for. You could also leave a review, make it nice, and share your opinion there if you would like, or message me or whatever you want to do. And if you want to come on the podcast and talk about a band, an era of emo, if it is Fall Out Boy and an album specifically, I welcome it. In the show notes, you'll find my email address. Just email me. Let's set it up. I'd love to have you on to talk about whatever you are obsessed with. But we're going to keep the train going. So our next class, we are going to kind of stay within the same era a little bit, have another conversation on something that could be slightly polarizing, but that's Paramore. So if you are a Paramore lover, or maybe you love Hayley Williams today and you don't know the history of Paramore, whatever you may feel, we're going to go into it in the next class. So I will see you there.